The final, it's Mill up against MewMew Malamar. Welcome back, everyone, to more from the Sableyes. We are here for the last game from our winner box tournament. On the left, it is Scott playing the Magcargo Mill, and on the right-hand side, we have Calvin, who hasn't been featured in our game so far. He's playing MewMew Malamar. How are we doing, Jordan?
Pretty good. It's a pretty exciting match because we saw Scott on stream earlier against Marco, and he was able to take the win with this store deck against Obstagoon. And we haven't seen Calvin yet at all today, but both of these players are in contention to win this tournament. The winner of this game is quite likely to win the box, so we'll see who ends up coming out on top. And I think, unlike the Obstagoon versus Stall matchup theoretically, which we theorized was going to be heavily favored towards Scott, although it ends up being a bit closer than we first anticipated, this one I think is actually a much closer matchup overall.
Yeah, it could potentially go either way. We see Calvin here having a pretty strong start for MewMew Malamar. He's got himself a couple of a Jirachi in the active. He's got a couple of Inkay on the bench, and Calvin obviously opting for the Hidden Fates versions of Inkay there. Very, very rich of him, but that's okay. And he's got the Treve Noir in play as well, identifying straight away, right, I'm playing Mill. Pretty much the way that I'm going to try and win this game is by shuffling Scott out of resources as early as possible.
Yeah, seems like a pretty good strategy to me. I mean, when you think about it, Nightwatch almost just straight up counters the Intrepid Sword strategy that Scott's going with. Intrepid Sword basically just says, I'm going to start every turn with +3 cards in hand, and Treve Noir says you're going to start each turn with -2 cards in hand. So it kind of just takes away some of the core strategy of this Mill deck of just building your hand up over time and slowly finding yourself with a massive hand to just continuously mill cards from your opponent. However, the one thing that Treve Noir does not do well against is a strategy that involves Magcargo. With Smooth Over, Scott can make sure he finds exactly which card that he wants every single turn. And I believe I might be able to see that Smooth Over Magcargo in his hand, actually. I could be mistaken. Yeah, there it is.
There it is. It's at the back there, so...
If his hand does not get disrupted on this turn too, and he does not have that Magcargo shuffled away from him, he'll kind of be slightly Trevenant-proof, I guess, for the rest of the match until it gets knocked out.
He'll be able to find himself what he needs, and the good thing about the Slugma on the bench, at the Magcargo on the bench, is that Calvin will need to utilize Naganadel GX to take a knockout on it, and getting rid of a switch there off of the bell, but Bryson Man is not super good either. Calvin would have liked that coming up into this turn. Scott using Intrepid Sword, ending his turn here, and now Calvin is going to be able to try and find himself a way to attack with this Treve Noir. He's got the Malamar, he's discarding the energy, he's got another one in hand, so the attack is there. It's just a matter of whether or not he can find himself the switch out here. Using Marnie to shuffle away cards from Scott's hand is also very strong.
That is a very strong card that we'll see from Calvin this turn. Getting that Magcargo out of Scott's hand, even though he didn't know he was holding it. I think, is that a Slugma or a Magcargo in Scott's hand? I think he's drawn a Slugma and not a Magcargo.
It's kind of tough to see there. I didn't quite catch it, but... yeah.
But we could still see that attack coming out from Treve Noir, and it looks like that is what's going to be happening here. Calvin has found the switch from that Jirachi, so we're probably going to be seeing that attack from the Treve Noir.
Don't forget to actually attach the energy, Calvin. Come on, mate.
That could have been a disaster.
There we go.
He corrected himself, and we're going to see half of Scott's hand going back into the deck, and this is definitely when the deck is most vulnerable, before he's properly set up. And of course, Calvin's also going to be taking an early prize card, which is definitely important against these decks. It does activate Lieutenant Surge's strategy for Scott, and more importantly, in my opinion, allows him to promote that Mareep into the active. But we don't see the Slumbering Forest yet, so he's got a 50% chance to wake up and just remove Scott's hand once again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott doesn't actually have a hand at the moment. He's only going to have the 3 cards from Intrepid Sword, so it might come down to this coin flip. I guess the good thing for Scott is he managed to find another Mareep. So worst case scenario, he gets cards shuffled into his hand, and then he can just do the same thing again.
That's such a huge flip, because we did actually see not only one switch milled from the turn 1 below Scott, but we also saw Calvin using a switch to get that turn 2 attack off. So he is already down to his last 1 or 2 switches in deck, which is definitely scary against this deck. If he does get that Mareep combo off, he's going to be pretty consistently staying asleep. But we see the Mareep knockout there. Scott going down to 1 card. This is a super super sketchy spot for Scott to be in. That one card in his hand needs to either be pretty good or he needs to get some lucky coin flips.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look like there's a huge amount going on. Scott might be in a position where, yeah, again, I'm going to need to do something else. He's got a poker com into, yeah, so I mean, like, there's no Dedenne in Scott's deck, is there? So, I mean, there's nothing that's super impressive here, but the thing that he can do is he can grab himself the Smooth Over Magcargo, which is really, really big. And Scott there just checking, what happens if I don't have a hand? Like, do I still have to shuffle the deck, or can I use the Smooth Over to put a card on top and it stays there for the next turn? At least he's going to be able to...
That's actually a really interesting concept, because Scott can theoretically use Smooth Over and then choose not to activate Intrepid Sword. Although, did Scott just choose not to use Smooth Over at all?
Yeah, he chose not. He chose. Well, he must have either put it there whilst we were talking about it, or chose not to do it. But regardless,
I think that Calvin just shuffled his whole deck and then gave it back to Scott, and he didn't put the ability counter on that Magcargo. So
no,
that makes me think that he actually did forget to use Smooth Over there. Which, to be fair, 2 out of 3 chances he would have lost the card anyway. But still seems like a bit of a mistake not to take advantage of it. And once again, unfortunately, Calvin did actually wake up, and that's the other thing is if you use Smooth Over. Calvin could have just stayed asleep and not gotten the attack off. He could have just kept that card. So
yeah, exactly.
Bit of a missed opportunity there, but I think he got the Magnolia. Maybe Magcargo. Did Scott just get that lucky?
Either he was incredibly intelligent and put it there whilst we weren't paying attention and he managed to keep it, or he just got exceptionally lucky and kept the Magnolia. Regardless, Scott is back to a full hand, and he's going to be able to grab himself a few more resources here. Things like a Rangaroo might be useful. Things like more Mareep could potentially be useful, but here's the thing. Calvin's already taken 3 prizes. He's only going to need to take 3 more to win the game, and Scott is barely anywhere near getting a mill strategy going. So this is going to be quite difficult for Scott. This looks like the Smooth Over here. He's going to be putting that on top of the deck and then utilizing a Rangaroo to grab that card, which was the rod here. So he's going to be able to utilize that and put a few more cards that he needs, like those Mareeps, back into the deck.
Yeah, I think Scott is acknowledging that he has to get a little lucky to come back from this bad a start, knowing that the Mareep strategy is probably going to be his best way to try and cheese his way to victory in this game. Calvin's also been playing really well this game. He's got himself that turn 2 Trevor, and then once he got that, he just stopped playing cards. We haven't seen Calvin do anything except for roll to see if he woke up, which he has luckily done every time so far, and then just attack with Night Watch every turn, which has been definitely hindering Scott in this game so far. Unfortunately, failing to remove his supporter in the last turn, but he's still just in such a good spot, and because he hasn't been playing cards, we've only seen Scott actually activate Voloba once this entire game. So Calvin's deck is very thick, and then we see the Marnie and presumably another Night Watch coming out, potentially going to be screwing over Scott's plans again, and actually seeing the Ultra Necrozma starting to get powered up on the bench. Maybe looking to try and one-hit KO a second Zacian if it comes active later on.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice. I mean, obviously, Zacian does have that little bit of extra HP that he'll be able to utilize. Scotch having to shuffle away the Tag Call and the Slumbering Forest there, but he still does... He has 3 cards in hand. Is he already drawn for turn? He must have already drawn for turn.
Yeah, he did.
Sorry, I missed that there. I was too busy thinking about our last couple of games, Jordan, where people have made grievous errors that I thought, good grief, it's not happened again, has it?
Oh, let's hope not. It looks like he was not able to get the best supporter in the deck, but he did find himself a Cynthia Caitlin there, which he'll be able to draw 3 cards with, and of course he can also find himself any 1 card that he wants. He could even just Cynthia Caitlin to draw that card, depending on what it is. Looks like...
What is going on here? What's happened? There's been some weird fumbling on going down there. I presume that what's happened...
He just put 1 too many cards down and just was just using the monkey.
Yeah, I presume what happened there was that he'd accidentally put the Smooth Over card on the table and then didn't put it on top of the deck and then accidentally left the top card of the deck. So, whoops, whatever.
It got resolved by the Intrepid Sword activation at the end there. Pretty weak turn for Scott, honestly. He left the Zacian in the active, so... we're going to see Calvin going down to 1 prize, knocking out that Zacian, and he has not used a GX attack this game. Makes me think that maybe even something like a Sky Scorching Light could end the game if Scott ever takes a prize for whatever reason. But most likely we're just going to see that Photon Geyser knocking out whatever non-dull Pokemon comes into the active at some point during this game. That's inevitably going to happen, right?
Yeah, you would think so, and the key thing for Calvin that turn wasn't actually the fact that he got the Ultra Necrozma powered up, it's the fact that he got the escape board on the active Trevnoir. That means that even if Scott does manage to put this to sleep, he'll have to leave the Mareep there. Then Calvin can just retreat the Trevnar into the powered Ultra Necrozma and take the knockout. So Calvin playing this game incredibly smartly, utilising the resources that he has, but not overcommitting. He knows that he can't use too many cards, or otherwise he'll find himself in a position where he loses. So instead, just giving himself the best chance to win with the cards that he has. It's very, very intelligent.
Yeah, it seems really unrealistic for Scott to have a chance to win this game. He's actually sacrificing his... Well, not sacrificing, but removing his doll from the active, which is really interesting. He's got himself an extra doll anyway there off of the Smooth Over plus Oranguru, so as long as he's got an air balloon, he will be able to retreat back into a doll, which I imagine is going to be the case. But it seems like Scott is intentionally using resources just to put this Trevnoir to sleep, and it doesn't matter due to the escape board. I think Scott
might have missed that.
Yeah, he wasn't paying attention to the fact that there was an escape board on the active, and that's going to be the game. I don't think there's anything could have done about it, though. Like, even if he did leave the Pokédoll active, I think he eventually goes on to lose that game, because he only plays 4 Doll, and he's more than 4 turns away from being knocked out, so eventually he just knocks out all of the Dolls and takes out the Oranguru when it eventually comes up to try and resource those Dolls back in. So definitely a pretty unwinnable game for Scott there. He did have a bit of a poor start, but to be fair, that poor start was mostly because of Calvin. It was because of Calvin using that Marnie and the Trevenant's Night Watch attack to screw over Scott's resources, so there's nothing stopping Calvin from just doing that again.
Yeah, exactly. We see the strength of MewMew Malamar in that particular turn there, and we've got the Jirachi to start off with for Calvin, as well as a nice little mulligan from Scott as also, which is good for Calvin. Give himself some more resources in the early game. If he can set up that Trevnoir again, start taking some knockouts early and shuffle down Scott's hand, then I feel like he's going to be in a very strong position to try and get this game finished and give himself the best opportunity to win the tournament. But obviously there was a couple of coin flips in there that went Calvin's way. You have to wonder what would have happened if he had a flip tails instead. Yeah,
actually those sleep flips are a really big deal, because they every single one of them kind of delayed Scott's entire setup by an extra turn due to that Night Watch attack. And we also saw Calvin getting the turn 2 Night Watch, and Scott only realistically getting, I believe it was just the one below where he was able to pull off on the first turn for the entire game. So he never really got much of a chance to discard some of Calvin's crucial resources, such as those extra switches or the escape board that he ended up using to win the game. Those could end up being discarded early this game, and interestingly enough, we actually see Calvin going for the Mewtwo instead of the Trevnoir to attack with this game, which works because Mewtwo can still use Night Watch. And we actually see him discarding some reset stamps there on the first turn as well, so a couple of resources in the discard pile that Calvin doesn't really want to see.
Yeah, exactly. Discarding the Giratina here. This is an inclusion that we've been playing around with this Jirachi build of MewMew Malamar. The one that we featured on the channel obviously didn't have Jirachi in it, so we will take a look at this one a little bit closer to Melbourne IC. Seems like a pretty good idea. But yeah, no, we've got a much slower start here for Calvin. He's been... What's just happened here? Scott's just gone, did you just shuffle your hand into your deck? I don't know. I think I'm hoping that was correct. Yeah, that's fine. That's the cards that Calvin had. I think it was just the fear of I've just shuffled 4 cards back into the deck. Were they the right ones? And it looks like that's going to be the turn for Calvin. He's left the Jirachi in the active, which is a really good play here. Obviously, he had the switches, could have easily used them, but instead, I'll leave the Jirachi here. It doesn't actually matter whether it's asleep or not, because I can still use the ability. And then I'll just retreat from it next turn. Means that the Mareep on Scott's side of the field isn't as critical a threat.
Yeah, exactly. Jirachi doesn't care if it's put to sleep, it puts itself to sleep half the time anyway. But there we see the first Belelber of this game, discarding, I wouldn't say any crucial resources from Calvin. We see a War Energy, which is not a terrible card.
I think there was a Marnie in there as well, though, so that's a bit of a disappointing one. That's one that Calvin would have liked to have used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's not too worried about it, but it's certainly not too bad. I don't think there's a Trevenant Noir in the discard yet, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Scott just confirmed there is none in the discard right now, so makes me think, what if Calvin doesn't actually have any Trevenant Dusknoirs in his deck? Because I can't think of any reason why he would realistically choose to go for the Mewtwo instead of the Trevenant. It's just one extra piece he's forcing himself to find to get that turn 2 Night Watch, which was so devastating for him in the first game. It looks like Calvin is getting ready for an attack. If the Trevenant is in deck, he's found himself a Quick Ball, and I believe he hasn't attached for turn yet, so he should be able to get off this attack this turn. Let's just see which attack he chooses to go for, and if that Trevenant is in the deck.
Yeah, it looks like he's discarded the Psychic Energy here from hand. It's an interesting choice, because I'm not sure that Calvin actually has a second one, so hopefully he has thought that through. Another Malamar coming onto the field of play as well. And we'll have a chance to see whether Calvin knows what is in his hand better than I do. I'm sure he's playing intelligently. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing.
I'm pretty sure he hasn't attached yet.
Yeah, no, he hasn't.
He wants like a free charge, and I believe he attached last turn.
But no, it's just a pass.
Missed the attack there. That's really weird.
Yeah, discarding that energy costs him the chance to use Night Watch. Not only is he not going to be able to shuffle in cards into Scott's deck, but that doll is still in the active. Obviously, Scott is not necessarily super worried about that. He can just continue setting himself up here. He's really got himself a free turn to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess of all the attacks he could have missed, this one wasn't a terrible one to miss because he would have only been knocking out a Poké Doll. And Scott's hand was pretty big in that situation where I feel like the Night Watch probably wouldn't have been a huge disadvantage to him. But still, whenever you have the opportunity to take out a Poké Doll, I feel like it's worth doing because eventually they're going to run out. Eventually they're going to be forced to use Resource Management to get them back. And when that happens, you can take a free knockout on that Oranguru.
Yeah, exactly, and now Scott's setting himself up. He's got the Mareep, the Slumbering Forest as well. Now he's playing Bellelba and Bryson Man, discarding a few cards from Calvin's deck. Nothing important there. And the more important thing for Scott is that he has the doll on the bench, another Intrepid Sword, and it is Calvin's turn. He's unable to get himself out of this sleep here, so he does have the escape board, which is good, but does he have enough energy in the discard to power up this Trevnoir from nothing?
Well, I mean, he could always just retreat into the Jirachi and then Stellar Wish, find himself a switch, or even just retreat into the Jirachi and just leave it there for a turn, because he's not in a huge rush to take knockouts. He could just potentially just wait one turn, make sure his Mewtwo is powered up on the bench and then start attacking later on. But you can't sit around forever. Like, you do need to start taking these prizes fairly quickly. Still doesn't put on the most pressure compared to a lot of other decks where you don't necessarily have to attack every turn to stay in the game, but you definitely have to be attacking more than you're not attacking, or they're going to mill you before you end up winning.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually you have to start doing something. And I mean, it looks like we've got a switch here, so it's not the end of the world for Calvin. He's going to be able to take a knockout. He's also attaching the Aurora energy to that Mewtwo as well, so now Snipe is a potential option. He's going to take a knockout, and Scott is stuck with 2 cards. But his setup is significantly better this game than it was in the first one. So you'd think he'd be in a position where he'd be able to come out of it a little bit better.
Yeah, I would love to see Calvin at some point soon trying to take a turn to use that Nagano Snipe, knock out that Magcargo on the bench, and then his future Marnie plus Night Watches will be a lot more devastating if Scott can't just find the card he needs to get out of it. But for now, Scott's continuing on with his mill strategy, finds another switch off of the Belova. Calvin was forced to use a switch last turn in order to get that attack off, and now he's just another switch down, so it could be hard to get out of that that sleepy. Almost woke up there, it looked like.
Almost. Didn't quite get there, though.
Off.
Managed to roll the second dice, which is always good when the Slumbering Forest is down. But yeah, I think there's 3 switch that are gone now, possibly even more. So this Mewtwo might be asleep for a bit. Consideration is, what do you do? Do you retreat into the Jirachi and just sack a turn and hope for the best, or do you try and desperately find a last switch if it is still in deck?
The other problem is Calvin's using up a lot of his Marnies here to try and keep up this pressure, and it seems like he's very quickly going to be running out of Marnies, very quickly going to be running out of ways to disrupt Scott's board in his hand. He can still find that Nagano Snipe in the near future to take out the Magcargo, and he does find the Viridian Forest as well, which is pretty useful. It means he can just roll one head to wake up from a Mareep sleep, but I still feel like he's just not applying enough pressure. I think Scott's going to be able to have a pretty good chance of milling Calvin for now, especially since his deck is looking pretty thin this game.
It's a much thinner deck in this game than he had in the last one, and Jirachi doesn't even wake up here, so it's a bit of an awkward situation for Calvin. You can see Scott just having a bit of a count there. How close are you two being decked out? Can
Look
I
like
get
only
there?
7 or 8 cards.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
He's in range where I feel like if Scott gets double below this turn, I think he might just win the game. I don't think it's possible for Calvin to take 5 prizes if he loses 6 cards this turn. Even just 1 below, I think will put him in enough of a position where he's going to be in a pretty good spot. And I actually see a tackle in Scott's hand, so if he was able to find himself a Lieutenant Surge this turn, I think he could almost lock the game. But instead, he's going for the safe play. He's getting that power pad. He might not have had the blowers he needed in deck. So he's shuffling those in, getting them straight away with the tackle. And I think he's going to be happy to just settle for a single blower here, which will probably just about close up the game.
Yeah, it looks like Calvin's gone. Yeah, no, there's nothing more I can realistically do here. Let's just go to game 3. Hopefully I can get a better setup, and we can get the Trevenant Dust Noir attack going a little bit sooner. Because, yeah, just those couple of turns where one switch had to go through, I think it was a Professor Magnolia, and then one got discarded off of the Bell Elba and Bryson man, and it was just too much stress for Calvin. He's going to need to try and set up like he did game 1 in order to win this set.
Not to mention, he did make that mistake where if he got to attach the energy, he wasn't able to kind of screw over Scott's setup in the early game, which is definitely a big issue in this matchup. I think if he's able to go first in this game and start attacking turn 2, he's going to be in a pretty good spot. I did actually like Calvin's strategy in that game, going for that MewTwo tag team instead of attacking with the Trev Noir. Even though it does require 1 extra combo piece, it does allow him to attack with a Pokemon which has only 2 retreat costs, so a Skateboard on a Mewtwo can retreat only discarding 1 energy, which I think is a pretty beneficial thing to have, but it didn't end up helping him in that game.
Yeah, exactly. Again, starting Jirachi, which is super strong. Scott has the Zacian in the field of play as well, so everyone getting what they want off of the first turn here. Calvin discarding a Psychic Energy with the Mysterious Treasure to find himself a MewMew. He's got a Ditto from hand as well, so as long as he's got an attachment here, he should have all he needs to get himself into a decent attack next turn. He will need Malamars and attachments, obviously, but the key thing is he's got the pieces, and look at that, he can discard with the Aurora, gets rid of the Latios, and now he can pick up a Quick Ball with this Jirachi. So there's his attacker. Now all he needs is a Malamar, an energy, and a switch next turn, and he can start putting that pressure on.
Yeah, that is certainly a respectable turn from Calvin. I didn't get a good look at his hand, but he has that Quick Ball, so worst case scenario, he can always find himself something like a Donate GX to draw himself a new hand, and he really isn't asking for much next turn to start attacking with Night Watch, knock out the Sarangaroo on the first turn of the game, take a prize, and start annoying Scott's hand would be pretty ideal, but Scott is having a pretty good start himself. He's already got that Slugma down and the Slumbering Forest, and is going ahead and drawing 7 more cards with that Professor Magnolia. So 7 cards is a respectable amount. If he doesn't play too many of them, then the Night Watch won't be too scary, hopefully. But it looks like he's going to be going ahead and using that resource management on this turn, discard some of those, get back some of those cards he discarded on that Professor Magnolia. I'm not sure what he's going to be worth getting back. It looks like the Power Pad would be a pretty good one to shuffle back into the deck. He is just going to go ahead and use the Intrepid Sword instead, though, which makes sense. I thought he was going to attack because he put the Recycle on the active, but because of the way Recycle works, it never doesn't make sense to just attach it.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got it in the field of play, then it's always going to be in your hand. So attaching it to the Oranguru is not that bad of an idea. Even if it does get knocked out, whatever, you can just grab it back. So now Calvin grabbing himself a Trevenant Dust Noir here. Obviously has himself a supporter in hand. He'll flip it over here. That looks like... Oh, actually, no, it's just an Aurora energy here. So he's just going to use the... Oh my goodness gracious, mate. He's got a switch off of this Jirachi, which means he is going to be able to attack. So he's got the 2 Aurora energies, discarding that Trevenant Dust Noir, a Malamar as well, and now he's got a 0-card hand. Oh, and he picks up 2 supporters. Unbelievable, Calvin. What a boy. You can see him rubbing his hands together there as well.
I did. What prize card did he take?
Oh, I didn't see it. I was just watching him rub his hands together under the table. Very excited.
Yeah, that's certainly what you want to see off of a Night Watch. He takes the first prize card. Scott does have that that Clefairy Doll to put into the active, so he's not going to be shaving off prize cards too quickly. It looks like he actually had another supporter in his hand anyway. But more importantly for Scott, we actually see the Smooth Over Magcargo coming into play, so he's going to be at least a little bit immune to completely bricking off of Night Watch, which is definitely what you want to see if you're Scott. Obviously, Calvin does still potentially have that option to go for that Nagano or snipe later in this game, take out the Magcargo, and then go for the Night Watch. And I think that's probably what you want to be aiming to do in this matchup, is just stop that Magcargo loop from going for the entire game. Just stop those Mareeps from continuously putting yourself to sleep, because Calvin is definitely in a bit of a sketchy situation here, having effectively a 0-card hand potential, and that Mareep plus the Stadium being in play could be worrisome for him.
Yeah, exactly, and Scott is going to be able to get going with his Bellelbas and Bryson Men here. I guess that's the plural form of that particular card, but he's got 2 of them in hand, and he's going to be able to start discarding resources. And if you're Calvin, you're very worried here, because not only are you discarding resources that you might need for later, but you also don't have a huge amount of resources in your hand right now anyway, so Scott choosing to go into the Mareep here, identifying the fact that Calvin only has the 1 card. What are the chances it is a switch card? Not super high. Oh, it's a Dedenne. It's a Dedenne. It's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. But he doesn't find the switch.
He does find something like a switch if he wants to take out this Mareep. He doesn't have the escape wall on the active future yet, which is a pretty big deal. So unless he's able to find either another support to keep digging, then Calvin might just have to pass the turn here. I do worry that he might have to play too many cards. What was really good for him in the first game is that he was able to get his stuff without too many cards.
Unbelievable! He's just got a switch. Oh no, Calvin. Just getting everything he needs. And he gets rid of the Magcargo and the Great Ball. I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but he got rid of them regardless.
But he's definitely putting a lot of pressure this game. This is exactly what he wants to be doing. He's only not wasted, but he's only had to use 1 so far to take 2 prize cards. So if we go with the logic that 3 more switches equals to at least 3 more prize cards, then he's also got those escape boards in his deck as well. I feel like Calvin has all the resources he needs to be able to take these last 4 prize cards before he gets milled. His deck is still pretty thick, but the bigger question is, what are those Bellelgas going to be discarding? Because if they hit some of Calvin's key resources, that could just be the difference between winning and losing this game.
Yeah, you have to worry, does the Bellelba discard a switch for Calvin? If it does, it's a problem. It doesn't there. He manages to keep it. He would have liked to have seen that Lysander Labs, though, to get rid of the Slumbering Forest, but doesn't really matter here. Scott opting to just pass this one across by the looks of it. We're going for an Intrepid Sword, I presume.
Yeah, I didn't see.
I imagine that was what just happened, because Calvin's playing cards, so he must have done something. So there's an attachment, and we'll just remove. Oh, he shuffles in the Energy and the Oranguru, both very good cards to shuffle away.
Scott only had 4 cards in hand, so I think that means maybe he didn't use Intrepid Sword last turn, which would be a bit of a mistake.
Oh no, Scott.
But here we go. He's going straight in for another Smooth Over to set up his board. What's good for Calvin is he has been taking out those Mareeps, so he doesn't really need to switch every single turn. He only needs to switch on or skateboard on the turns where the Mareep comes into the active, and looks like that's what's going to be happening this turn. But if the Mareep's active, that means there's no Pokédoll active. So sure, he needs to find a card or he needs to get some lucky flips here, but at least if he actually gets through the attack, he actually gets to take a prize this time.
Exactly.
And maybe this could be the opportunity that Calvin's been waiting for, to try and spend that turn to knock out that Smooth Over Magcargo, but it's not as strong now because we see a Slugma on the bench, but Calvin's just going to go for a Marnie here. If he finds himself a switch or an escape board or some combination of cards to get an attack, then it's going to be removing Scott's hand down to 2 cards once again.
And there is the escape board, so Calvin has the out. He's not going to be asleep this turn. The question becomes, does he find the switch to take the knockout? If he does, then he'll be in a pretty strong position. Only 4 prize cards left for Calvin, so 1 more knockout means he's halfway there. And the Zacian being on the bench is a potential target if there is any Gust that isn't Great Catcher. I'm not sure if Calvin is running that, but there is always the potential. Discards the Metal Energy there and grabs himself a switch off of the Jirachi. So here comes the knockout. Calvin's finding switch every time he needs it.
That's pretty good. Another play that Calvin can actually make here, if he's able to find a couple of Psychic Energy to put in the discard pile, next time his his Mewtwo gets stuck in the active against a Mareep, he could actually just use the escape board and power up a Malamar on the bench to use Psychic Sphere to take the knockout on the Mareep. That could be an easy way to take a prize card without wasting a switch resource. So that's another option that Calvin has available to him. Or even just, finding a different attacker. He's got a lot of Pokemon that can do 50 plus damage for 3 energy. So it looks like he is just going to be going for that Night Watch again this turn, though. Or maybe not. He's putting a lot of energy on that Mewtwo, which is kind of unnecessary if he's planning on using Night Watch, unless he wants to snipe with the Gyarados sometime in the near future. I don't know. It looks like he's going for Night Watch.
Yep, there's the Night Watch, and he gets rid of Bellelba from hand for Scott as well. So now if Scott wants to do any milling, he's going to need to find another one, although it does look like he already had... Oh no, he just had the research in hand. So no milling happening this turn, which is probably a good thing for Calvin. 2 Smooth Overs for Scott and 2 Orangaroos, which is very, very strong. We're going to be able to find a lot of specific cards here. But the question is, does Scott have enough time to get himself the milling that he needs? Like, I mean, if Calvin is able to leave this Mewtwo in the active and doesn't get put to sleep, then it's going to be tough for Scott to have enough time to win the game.
That's for sure. I'm pretty sure that a majority of Scott's Mareeps, if not all of them, are in the discard pile now. So he'd have to start maybe using resource management or just an ordinary rod plus a search card to try and find himself access to those Mareeps, which shouldn't be too hard to do because he does have that double smooth over. Otherwise, he could just continue going with the classic Dole strategy, but eventually he's going to run out of Doles, and Calvin only needs a couple more knockouts. And judging by the way he's putting his energy onto that Mewtwo, I'm starting to wonder maybe he plays something like an Espeon and Deoxys tag team. And if he does, this game will be very easy to close out for Calvin.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like Scott was unable to get anything of use here, bar the Pokédoll. He'll be able to grab that, but I mean that Calvin will be able to just shuffle the cards out of Scott's hand again. He's able to grab 2 specific cards here, so he's grabbing Bellelba and that Pokédoll, so that's a good news for him. It looks like the retreat is happening here into the Pokédoll, and then we'll just see a Intrepid Sword from Scott, you'd think, unless he's already passed the turn. Nope, there it is, Intrepid Sword. He didn't forget this time.
And he got a couple of decent cards off the top there. I didn't actually see an ordinary rod in his deck when he was looking through. I think I can see one in the discard pile there, so he might actually not have any access to getting his Mareeps back, and I'm pretty sure he also lost one of his resource management Orangaroos right at the beginning of the game, so...
Oh, it's the Puffy Smasher that Calvin's going for. There is a very interesting play. He's moving himself around that Dole, not worried about the fact that Scott has resources in his hand. He's just going to go, I'm just taking knockouts, I don't care. And now this Pokédoll, which is technically a Pokemon, is asleep in the active. So, there you go. That's an interesting factoid.
I didn't know that was a thing that could happen, to be honest.
Well, it's happened. This is it. The first time ever Pokédoll is asleep.
It's also a pretty interesting target that Calvin chose to take. We've been talking this whole game about how sniping a Magcargo would be the way to go, but now that Scott's got 2 smooth over Magcargos in play, Calvin is prioritizing just knocking out whichever Pokemon Scott had, which had the free retreat with that Everloom, which I think is a pretty intelligent play. It's going to make it hard for Scott to pivot into a Mareep or another Pokemon. This one is just knocked out next turn. And yeah, Calvin's deck still looks pretty healthy. I can't tell exactly how many cards, but I want to say there's still 20 plus or at least 15 plus cards in his deck still at this point.
Yeah, exactly. He's got plenty going on here, and this is a really strong position to be in. Not only does he have all of those energy on the active, he also has a second Mewtwo on the bench that he can make use of. I think time's just been called here. I think that's what happened with that dice getting put down on the field. So looks like this is going to be the last few turns of the game here. The Naganadel GX will snipe and take a knockout on the Orangaroo. So now Scott doesn't have access to a way to grab those cards off of the smooth over. Calvin identifying the fact that, well, all I need to do is take 2 more prizes. If I can force Scott to not get what he wants, all I need is an energy and I win the game.
Oh yeah, and I actually did see the Mew in Scott's deck, so I gotta imagine that Quick Ball's gotta be taking the Mew this turn, right? I mean, if he doesn't find the Mew, then Calvin has a very easy way to win this game this turn. I think at this point, Scott can't actually win the game in time, so he might just be trying to go for just stopping Calvin from winning the game, or maybe he's got his eyes on the prize and wants to just just speed ahead and just try and milk Calvin in the last few turns if there's enough cards in the deck. I can't really tell, but it looks like that's what he's doing. He's benching that Slugma and attaching to it. Makes me think maybe he's going for a massive double below the Bryson Man plus GX attack next turn. But did he not bench the Mew?
Scott didn't bench the Mew, so if Calvin has an energy, if Calvin has an energy, then the game is over here. We're seeing a bit of a thin. I don't know why Scott didn't do it. He had it in hand, didn't he?
Yeah, he didn't even have to quick pull for it. He just drew it.
And here we go. Calvin's missed the energy.
Oh my god!
Unbelievable! This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. Does Calvin have a way to punish Scott for that absolutely horrifically bad? This tournament's been terrible, Jordan. We can't record these anymore. This is every single game I feel like has had something go wrong. And I'm
trying to think if there's like any way to justify it. Maybe Scott knew that Calvin didn't have any energy left or something, but he's definitely got switches left. And
yeah, but even then, surely, oh my god, Calvin here, he's gone back into the Jirachi. Does he have a switch? I guess maybe. There's a switch in deck, but he's got to get the switch and he's got to get himself the Viridian Forest.
He doesn't because...
Oh no, that's true, yeah. He's got... This is... Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Why did you bench the Mew?
Scott, bench the Mew, mate. What are you doing?
No.
What are you doing, Scott? Oh my word.
Well, there we have it. That's another game from this tournament that's concluded. This was the top tables.
Yep. That was it.
And this is a tournament that we were both at and didn't do well, Mitch. How does that make you feel?
Mate, I feel horrible. With the screen is black, and so is my heart right now. Thanks, Jordan, for sitting through it. I can't believe you didn't bench the Mew.
Well, it looks like we have another person to go shout out afterwards.
Oh my goodness. There we have it, the end of yet another exciting game from our winner box at Good Games in Adelaide. Calvin gets across the line there with MewMew Malamar, beating out Scott's Mill because he didn't play down the Mew for some reason. Just play down the Mew, Scott. Please just play down the Mew, man. Like, it's so easy to do. Anyway, let's ignore that. Thank you very much to Jordan for coming along for commentary, as well as to Scott and Calvin for being willing to show their faces on camera. It's always greatly appreciated, as is your patronage. Thank you for watching. If you like the content and you want to see more, then consider subscribing. Click the button that is just about here. Over here, there are some videos that you might like to watch, as well as a playlist of more testing of Sword and Shield. We're getting pretty close to our Melbourne IC tournament, so we want to make sure that we're as good as we can be. We don't want to be playing like this in that particular tournament. Facebook, Twitter, @TheSableEyes_YT. And apart from that, we will see you all next time for more from The Sable Eyes. Bye.